Now I invite you to enter into a spirit of meditation, some of us would call prayer, as we share our opening words for today. And you might have noticed on your own, but I'm just going to tell you, that in honor of our topic this morning, Reading Only Women, not only all of our readings, but all of our music has been written and composed by women today. You might notice some of your favorites are among them. So we begin. Everything and everyone is precious beyond words. Everything and everyone is holy. And the point of our being on this sweet planet is to be of service to all of it. And when we understand this truth in our bones, joy fills our hearts. And again, some words as we enter into this service together. This is what I have to say to you. You know all that you need to know. You already are all that you need to be. It remains for you to recognize and acknowledge who you are, what you know, and the powerful presence that is awake within you. You think of yourself as fragile, but you are, in fact, strong. You sometimes feel alone, but you are, in truth, connected through spirit to all beings. Believe in this connection. Believe in yourself. That is all you need to do. I'm going to share a couple of very, very brief readings from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, one of the authors whom Peter has spent the past 6 months reading from, and I hope all of us will find time to read from someday, if not already. My own definition of a feminist is a man or a woman who says yes. There's a problem with gender as it is today, and we must fix it. We must do better. All of us, women and men, must do better. Teach her that if you criticize X in women, but do not criticize X in men, then you do not have a problem with X. You have a problem with women. And finally, your feminist premise should be, I matter. I matter equally, not if only, not as long as. I matter equally. Full stop. Well, at this point, it is my true honor to welcome Peter Huff forward. I do it with a heavy heart, though, because, surprise, Gus is here. That doesn't make my heart heavy. That makes my heart sing. As you may know, Peter Huff is moving this very month. This is our chance to stop him. So let's just work on that as we can. But Peter Huff is a beloved friend of this community and of mine, and a true colleague in a place where I sure need him. And I'm deeply grateful to you, Peter, for your solidarity with us and with justice and with human beings and life itself. Please join me in welcoming Peter Huff. Dennis, if you could get this door, and Rita, if you could get that one. Maybe we'll hear him again next week. There's a reason we told that story. But please welcome Dr. Peter Huff.
I'm living in the state of Washington, doing something most people in the Pacific Northwest never do. I'm wondering what it would be like to live in North Dakota. I'm standing in the marvelous Elliott Bay Book Company holding a fresh copy of Kathleen Norris's new book called Dakota, A Spiritual Geography. A few hours later, a mild earthquake will shake the Seattle area. For me, though, the shifting of tectonic plates starts when I hit page 2 of Norris's memoirs. It's her arresting description of the prairie land you and I know so well. A land of little rain and few trees, dry summer winds and harsh winters, a land rich in grass and sky and surprises. Something within me stirs and begins to speak up. I know it's crazy, it says, but just think about it. I did think about it. That was 1994. I thought about it for 20 years. Then on January 1st, 2015, Delta Airlines delivered me to North Dakota to take a job at a college none of my colleagues had ever heard of. Like Norris, who left Greenwich Village for Lemon on the North Dakota-South Dakota border, I had just completed weeks of friendly but anxious grilling. North Dakota? No, seriously, where are you going? University of Mary? Mary who? As we were beginning the final descent to Bismarck Municipal Airport, an interrogation of another kind began. The woman seated next to me, whom I had successfully ignored all the way from Minneapolis, St. Paul, leaned over and asked, "Are you from Bismarck?" "No," I confessed, bracing for a flood of unsolicited North Dakota nice. "I didn't think so." Thus began my sojourn in what one historian has called the most Midwestern state. And today, 4 years and a few traffic tickets later, I prepare to close this life chapter and commence what I'm sure will be another set of unique and memorable experiences in another place. Few experiences, however, will rival my North Dakota odyssey, many episodes of which have occurred in this sacred space and with you as fellow voyagers. Some certified gypsies like me leave behind at every turn of the road a trail of broken hearts or unpaid bills. I seem to be developing a pattern involving UU churches. As an amateur UU, in every sense of the term, I want to thank you for your hospitality, your good cheer, and your generous invitations to join your fellowship in your important ministry. As a professional student of religion and society, I want to commend you for your unwavering commitment to justice and the vital role you play in the intersection of humanity, nature, and moral drama we call Bismarck Mandan. As for your minister, I have to tell you she's by far the most extraordinary clergy person I've ever met. I've practiced ministry, I've trained ministers, and I know more ministers than anyone really ought to. Yours is astonishing in the capacity of her imagination and the caliber of her integrity. It's been my honor to serve in a modest way as her co-worker and collaborator. In the age of the so-called American Renaissance, Margaret Fuller, whom Emerson called our Queen of Discourse, offered this literary self-portrait. The attractive force of my mind consists in its energy, clearness, and I dare to say it, its Catholic liberality and fearless honor. Where I make an impression, it must be by being most myself. I read these words by the celebrated transcendentalist 100-something years ago and think of the prairie prophet in your midst. Karen, you have taught me more than I can ever fully comprehend or properly express. To paraphrase Job in the Bible, I am brother to a dragonfly. I've already established myself as something of an academic thrill seeker, traveling the country, teaching for food, and at my best, sort of like Caine from the 1970s TV show Kung Fu, moving from one adventure to another, fighting for justice, defending the underdog, except in my case with a Phi Beta Kappa key and zero ability in martial arts. Ever since high school, in fact, I've occasionally designed for myself unusual projects to prod my thinking in new directions and detach myself from the forces of consumerist and conformist culture. For example, not using store-bought wrapping paper for gifts, ditching my TV and stereo, taking no photographs on trips, writing by longhand or typewriter in a digital age, not using deodorant for a year. That was a lonely time. Wearing only secondhand clothes. You get the picture. Sometimes these ideas arise out of concrete circumstances. Other times they come to me out of the blue as a type of spiritual exercise, even a spiritual dare. This past fall, I caught what I think is one of the best. For the entirety of the year 2018, I would read only women writers. Since January 1st, I've read history, autobiography, fiction, theology, philosophy, and poetry by a variety of women writers. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Maya Angelou, Simone de Beauvoir, Mary Crow Dog, Mary Daly, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, Louise Erdrich, Melissa Fay Green, Zora Neale Hurston, Edna St. Vincent Millay, Iris Murdoch, Mary Oliver, Camille Paglia, Sylvia Plath, Marilyn Robinson, Gertrude Stein, and Virginia Woolf. I've also read biographies by women of Sylvia Beach, Margaret Fuller, Jean Stafford, and again, Virginia Woolf. Today, as we enter the 7th month of 2018, I offer a brief progress report at the midpoint of my latest experiment, sharing my adventures with remarkable women writers and reflecting on how the experience is shaping me intellectually and spiritually. First, let's talk about reading itself. I read for a living and for life. I read for work and for pleasure. In fact, I work for pleasure. When people ask about hobbies or what I read for fun, I'm the intellectual at a loss for words. When you live from a sense of vocation, these distinctions cease to have much relevance. If I went golfing or fishing or served like Thoreau as chaplain to the hunters, I would have to take a book along. I've always related to a character in a film from the 1980s, the title of which I can't recall, who takes books to movies hoping for daylight scenes. And I read a lot. From the brilliant Romanian scholar Mircea Eliade, I picked up what I suppose is a bad habit, chipping away at sleep, almost in an ascetic way. For many years, my pattern has been to rise between 4 and 5 o'clock, read for 2 or 3 hours, and if the day hasn't provided much meaningful reading time, pick up the program again until midnight or 1. Reading, as everyone in this room knows, is a near magical way to encounter the full range of human experience and advance the mysterious process of self-discovery. It's travel without the packing and the expense, with the option of migration into realms past and future. C.S. Lewis spoke eloquently of the clean sea breeze of the centuries that blows through the mind when by means of signs traced on paper or papyrus or carved into clay or stone, we meet and sometimes fall in love with people from other times and places. The literary critic I wrote my dissertation on, Alan Tate, reduced the enterprise of liberal learning to a 3-word formula: several thousand books. This quip, and this is the last time I'll quote a man in this talk, says much about the liberal life itself. A free and creative life, freely and creatively engaging the freedom and creativity of others. But what if most of those others liberally engaged are men? As I write these words in my study at home, I turn and, like Virginia Woolf, inspect the books lining the wall behind me. I see Bede, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Blake, Wordsworth, Dickens, Newman, Hopkins, Joyce, T.S. Eliot, Waugh, Wells, Chesterton, Orwell, Huxley, Tolkien, and others of the English-speaking male lineage. Yes, there's Mary Shelley, Mary Shelley's mom, Jane Austen, George Eliot, the Brontes, even Aphra Behn, and of course no Shakespeare's sister, as the author of A Room of One's Own reminds us. The fingerprints on the covers and the markings on the pages, though, tell a more complex story. Plus, just count the number of volumes on the shelves and calculate the male-female ratio. On this one bookcase, and I haven't looked at those to my left, or down the hall, or scanned the cases in the next room, or down the hallway headed north, or in the room after that, the men, especially the handled and annotated men, far outnumber the women. And then there's the whole question of frequency of reading. What books are touched again and again? Let's go to my office on campus. Here we confront the restrictions limiting academic fields like invisible fences confining untrained dogs. If you're a specialist in military history, for example, it's highly likely you're a man reading men about other men. Book after book, article after article, year after year, your whole career. Theology and religious studies, despite a massive sea change in the last 50 years, suffer from a similar problem, a nefarious gentleman's agreement, still betraying its roots in colonialism. Write on any feminist or womanist thinker or activist you like, the Guild says, but first, master in European languages, including the world's foremost all-male language, ecclesiastical Latin, the canon of classics. In Christian theology, it would be something like Augustine, Abelard, Aquinas, Luther, Calvin, Edwards, Kant, Hegel, Newman, Harnack, Rauschenbusch, Bultmann, Barth, Brunner, Bonhoeffer, Rahner, Whitehead, Niebuhr, Tillich, Moltmann, King, Gutierrez, Cohn, and so on. A few weeks ago, I was hosting a visiting scholar. For 48 hours straight, we were talking books. Or I should say, he was talking. I was sipping something and pretending to care, but I was listening. And soon I noticed every exciting book he mentioned was written by a man. Every single one. I'm looking around for the waiter, and he's shifting into high gear in his rhapsodic litany of the recent male literary greats, which I swear sounded a lot like this. Barbecued men, boiled men, broiled men, sautéed men, men kebabs, men Creole, men gumbo, pan-fried men, deep-fried men, stir-fried men, pineapple men, lemon men, coconut men, pepper men, men's soup, men's stew, men's salad, men and potatoes, men burger, men's sandwich, men étouffée. Or at least that's the way I thought I heard it. For many people, many academics of diverse genders, this Forrest Gump riff could easily represent the full sweep of a lifetime and an all-encompassing worldview. Despite all our intellectual rigor and spiritual progress, it's astounding and deeply disturbing how uncritical and unaware we still are. A big part of the problem is the concept of a canon or set of classics in the first place. In all of her deliciously audacious books, The Church and the Second Sex, Beyond God the Father, Gynecology, Pure Lust, Outer Course, Amazon Grace, philosopher Mary Daly set forth a serious and compelling vision of a world without models. Her most striking expression of this outlook was her terse reaction to a scholarly article entitled, "Jesus was a Feminist." Her response? Sure, but so what? My women-only reading program comes on the heels of my entrance into the cultural debate on monuments, especially Confederate monuments. Increasingly, I see the profound wisdom in the ancient Hebrew suspicion of all graven images. The new naked public square created by measured 21st century iconoclasm may make room in the public imagination for better angels to perform their long deferred work of social redemption. Once called commons, the uncluttered squares, stripped of both fantasy and thinly veiled intimidation, may serve as living monuments to a new era of common decency. Imagine how further along the bending arc of the moral universe we might be if Stone Mountain and Mount Rushmore were in their natural states. Imagine where we would be if my discipline, which, remember, produces ministers, dismantled the category of canon. Imagine where I would be if I re-examined the several thousand books on my bookshelves, or even rethought the whole notion of bookshelves, these linear and hierarchical shrines to the cult of words of men. During these 6 months, I've encountered some of the best writing I've ever seen. Mary Daly's spellbinding description of her creative process, writing like a house of fire. Zora Neale Hurston's haunting insight into the basin in the mind where words float on thought and thought on sound and sight. Melissa Fay Green's sensuous account of the sad sweetness of the Yiddish language, wherein centuries of poverty, exhaustion and abuse, faith, rebellion, and wit are squirreled away. Virginia Woolf's breathtaking 10-page narration of the ordinary sight of two people getting into a cab. Maya Angelou's unparalleled image of a gumballed word rolling around in an empty mouth. And every jaw-dropping line by Sylvia Plath, topped off by what, in the bell jar, has to be the greatest vomiting scene in all of Western literature. Perhaps more than anything, my reading project has seeped into my flesh and bones the way a new dietary scheme transforms your body and soul. As a teenager, I was mortified when my Southern Baptist airline executive father would take us to Europe, but then at a cocktail party loudly announced to the international community, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we don't drink." Foodways like this are social markers. They help us create and maintain our hard-won identities. Today, I can appreciate what my father was doing. Without knowing Margaret Fuller, he was making an impression by being most himself. These days, it's my turn to announce a countercultural dietary commitment. We are what we read. in those sometimes agonizing conversations with colleagues, students, friends, editors, booksellers, visiting scholars, and other people of the bookish type, I'm getting a kick out of saying, in a somewhat affected stage voice, and maybe a slightly revived Southern accent, "I'm sorry, sir, I don't read men." And maybe I'll never go back. What would it be like to read only women for life? While I'm pondering that, if you indulge me, I'll round things out this morning by returning to my opening theme. Reading only women is almost as crazy as moving to North Dakota. What's really nuts is leaving a place you've grown to love so much. Next time you drive by the Deer Head collection site or the long line leading up to Big Boys, when you enjoy a pizza or pint at my favorite sidewalk table, or lift high a homemade bismanuu.org poster on the Capitol lawn, or especially when you're knee-deep in snow by the banks of the Missouri, or under a flock of geese so close you can hear the skeletal structure squeaking, or whizzing down 1806 toward the site of one of the most phenomenal human gatherings in global history, just past a place called Huff. Remember the quiet professor with the big laugh, brother to a dragonfly, who shared your joys and sorrows, warmed himself in the glow of your radiant chalice, read Only Women for a Round of Seasons, gazed with you down that long bending arc, who will never forget and ever be grateful for the uncanny gravitational force that pulled him toward the one book on Dakota in a Seattle bookshop a quarter century ago, just hours before the earth moved. A woman's book which led him by the curious enchantment, a secret power inscribed deep in the art of all printed words, to a land of little rain and few trees, dry summer winds and harsh winters, rich in grass and sky and surprises. And talk about surprises. One's pretty much guaranteed. Next time a nice Midwestern woman asks me at 30,000 feet if I'm from Bismarck, the answer is yes.
Here are closing words. I was in love with the whole world and all that lived in its rainy arms. Please join us. Please hang around. Blessed be. Namaste. Bar the doors. Thank you.